Max, as you know, I'm a reader.
You are a reader. That's true.
I read
Sometimes.
a lot,
Yeah.
and I read a lot, and I'm always interested in football books. And this time of year, especially, let me tell you, because I feel like you've got brothers.
I do.
And a dad.
Yeah.
And
they
I've
can't
got,
read.
And okay. I've got brothers and a dad. And they're always the hardest to shop for.
Okay.
Mom, you can get something like heartfelt and, it's just, like get her a piece of jewelry and she'll just love it forever. Or you can like make macaroni art and she'll like it.
Okay.
Dudes are harder to shop
especially your mom.
Yeah, that's true.
You could do anything for your mom and she would be thrilled.
She just melt.
Yes.
Dudes are harder to shop for.
Sure.
Allow me to recommend a perfect gift. It is, if I may borrow this, a book that just came out, The Republic of Football, Legends of the High School Game of the Texas High School Game by Chad Conine, out from UT Press recently, and here to talk about the process of putting this book is the author. I'll just
got
hand
him
it back to you
here?
since it's yours, Chad Conine.
Yeah, there you go.
You want to turn on his mic?
And I've been trying to apply for a status as the official Christmas gifts for dads, brothers-in-law, and fathers-in-law.
Listen, it's because I do think that's true that it's harder to shop for dudes, because what do you get them especially sporty type dudes. Here's a way that they can expand their mind, and it happens to be about high school football. So I want to go back to the beginning of this process.
Right.
You're putting together the book, The Republic of Football. What spurred you to put on this to put together this book?
Yeah, I have a great story about that because a friend of mine and I were just riding in the car going to the movie, and we're talking about this coffee table book that I have called Home Field, which is also
I've seen that.
Yeah,
it's excellent.
It's also University of Texas Press, and that just turned out to be a great coincidence. But I said, I'd really love to read the stories from all of those stadiums. And then the light went on, and I had just recently, the previous football season, visited with a guy named Lance Lannert from Amarillo.
Oh,
Lance.
we know Lance.
Yes.
Lance is our boy.
Yeah.
And he was telling me about a game that Hamlin played against Panhandle that he covered back in '84, I think, when it was Art Briles' first year as a head coach in high school. And so that was kind of where I went first because I covered Baylor. Live in Waco, and I covered Baylor for a company called the Sports Exchange, and I had pretty good connections there. So I went and talked with Coach Briles in his office, and this is when McLean Stadium is still going up, and so, we talked about that game, and he was real busy, and so I got I think I got 13 minutes with him, but he directed me towards the guys that he coached that year, and guys like Jerry Woods and other players on that team, and that first chapter, working on that first chapter that I did, talking with those guys that were so excited to be talking about that team, I could kind of start to see forward in the process that it was going to be a lot of fun to talk to not only the big names, but then the guys that played with those big name guys and still love to tell those stories. And I ended up doing 130 to 150 interviews, and they were all half-hour, 2.5-hour deals where you just sit around and talk high school football.
And that's what's so interesting, and we run across this as well. And you talk to a lot of big names for this book: LaDainian Tomlinson, Drew Brees, Cliff Kingsbury, Robert Griffin III,
Hayden Fry. There's a great Hayden Fry in the story.
Hayden Fry,
He's an Iowa Hawkeye.
all these guys who are famous for many other things besides high school football.
Right.
But we found, and I imagine you found, that you go to these big names. You go to LaDainian Thompson, like an NFL Hall of Famer to be,
Right.
And you go to him, and he's accomplished everything. And he should have won a Heisman at TCU. And he goes, and he has an incredible NFL career. And you go and you say, hey, let's talk about playing at Waco U. And they just light up.
Yeah, and the cool thing about that was I went to Midway High School, and I graduated in '96. LaDainian graduated in '97 from Waco University High School, and I sat down with him at a Starbucks in Keller, and we talked for 45 minutes, and a lot of what we talked about was just guys that we liked to watch play and that he played with at university, and I would show up. I would show up to university games my senior year early to watch a guy named Lawrence Pullen in pregame because he was about 5'8" and could dunk better than any high school player I've ever seen. And so we talked a lot about that stuff and even Pee Wee days and things like that LaDainian is so excited about telling stories about. And like you said, I mean, he was the best running back in the NFL for the first decade of the 2000s.
Yeah.
And just loves to talk about high school football, and I found that all the way down the line. I was in Minnesota, just interviewed Adrian Peterson when I emailed the Saints, and I was like, hey, can I come over to West Virginia and talk with Drew? And they got back with me within 30 minutes, and they were like, yeah, come on. So you start to understand how much people value those days when things like that happen.
And this is kind of similar to what we do at Dave Campbell's Texas Football. Our magazine could not exist in any other state.
Right.
I firmly believe that.
Right.
Like, if you transplanted even go to California, where they've probably got as many high school teams.
Right.
Maybe. Like, you couldn't have this kind of thing. The same thing with that book is that you couldn't have the Republic of Football about California or Ohio or any of these other high school hotbeds, because even though high school football is big there, it's just bigger and more important and more impactful here.
Well, it's a huge part of our identity, and it has been. It was that long before Friday Night Lights, the book, came out.
Mm-hmm.
But when that came out, it became even more a part of Texas identity. And then when the movie and the television show, it's really amplified all of that. And so that's how we see ourselves. We see ourselves as people that value high school football very much. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably, more than anything, what separates it from California, Ohio, or Florida. I think those are places where high school football is kind of the proving ground for college players. And I feel like even though that's true here too, as much as anywhere in the country, I think it's more than that. I think, we watch games this weekend and next weekend with the high school football playoffs and the semifinals and the state championship. And, yeah, there's guys that are going on to college, but it's so exciting to be watching those teams in the middle of December with the chance of winning state. And you know what? We got 12 state champions, and it doesn't feel like too many.
No, and I fully believe that we're going to be sitting there at AT&T Stadium in Arlington next weekend next week from Wednesday until Saturday.
Yeah.
And I know, Max, we've done this long enough to know that, like, Saturday night after that last game's over, we're going to be exhausted. We're going to be whipped.
Right.
Yeah.
But we will be absolutely ready for another weekend to like it. There's nothing like it. It's just an identity. It's a hallmark of Texanness, really.
Yeah.
It's Chad Conine. The Republic of Football is the book. You can get it at UT Press. The website is utexaspress.com. I want to ask you, because there's a lot of history in this book. You make sure that you're talking to these big names about their high school experiences, but there's a lot of history. Were there any surprising stories, like historically, that you came across in the research for this book?
Oh, absolutely. And I mentioned Hayden Fry a minute ago, the Iowa coach, and of course Max has Iowa State.
Max an
stuff
Iowa
back.
State
I
fan.
got no time for
Sorry,
Hayden Fry. But one of the greats, no question.
But and this is kind of a giveaway, and one of the big things in the book that I think people will read and go, wow. And so maybe I shouldn't give it away, but I will anyway. I call Hayden Fry, and I'm asking about doing this interview, and right away he's like, what happened is we had a really good year my senior year in 1945. And but we got beat by one of the bigger schools, and it was all one classification, so you really didn't have a chance. So I figured out in the spring, or this is Hayden Fry talking, I figured out in the spring that if you weren't 19 on September 1st, you could play high school football. So I talked 10 of my classmates into dropping our senior English class, and we came back and played one more round and went 14-0 and won the state championship in 1946. And so
the most Hayden Fry thing
right,
I've ever heard.
yeah. And so I actually went to the library in Odessa. He was an Odessa High Bronco, and I went to the library and looked at the yearbooks and verified that this happened, and absolutely just the way he described it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's like verifiable from the yearbooks.
Who was? I'll put you on the spot. Who was your favorite person to talk to for this book? Because you talked to dozens, hundreds of people for this book. Who was your favorite person to talk to for this book?
Well, I mentioned LaDainian, and that was such a cool experience to talk with him. Talking to Zach Thomas on the phone, and he was a freshman in the White Deer chapter in the book, and to hear him talk about how much in terms of winning a championship, that was like the pinnacle for him. That was really cool and meaningful. But there were guys. Dat Wynn's high school teammate, a guy named Jeff Aguilar, who was just so enthusiastic to talk about what it was to play with Dat in that time when he was becoming, when he became a star and kind of out of nowhere. And Rockport Fulton isn't a place that's high on the list of dynasties, and and as particularly Asian American from Rockport Fulton. You wouldn't think that guy's going to be a great college football player, but he absolutely was. And Jeff Aguilar kind of had a front row seat. And I think that was the interview, because that was one of the first 4 chapters I did. That was one of the first interviews where I thought, I'm going to have to do this 150, 200 times, and I can't wait.
Yeah.
By the way, I wanted to mention, you talked about getting it at UTexas Press.
UTexasPress.com is where you can find.
I'm also state championship weekend. I'm going to be at the Arlington Sheraton on Thursday night from 5 to 9. So if anybody buys this as a gift or wants to buy this as a gift, I'll be there and can personalize it for whoever they're going to buy it as a gift.
Cool. That's excellent. I might stop by. I might.
You'll be busy, I'm pretty sure, from 5 to 9 on Thursday of state championship.
What am I going to be doing then? I mean, come on. The book is The Republic of Football: Legends of the Texas High School Game. Chad Conine, the author. I want to ask you one more thing.
Sure. Yeah.
You made sure in this book to have a nice balance of the really big schools, and the really small schools.
Yeah, that was a priority.
Do you have a preference?
Do I have a preference?
The big, because for me, that's always something we struggle with. Because, let's use state championship weekend as an example. Saturday.
Oh, you're talking about high school?
Yeah, high school.
High school.
Okay. Yeah. High school, Saturday. Yeah. Saturday, 6A games. We're going to have 50,000 people there. Mm-hmm. It's going to be, the atmosphere is going to be electric. It's going to be unlike anything. Mm-hmm. But I think part of me prefers Thursday because it's the small schools, it's the 2As and the 3As. Do you have a preference as far as high school football is concerned, or at least when you were talking to guys who played high school football, between the big programs like the Odessas or versus maybe the smaller programs like maybe the Rockport Fultons?
Man, that's a really good question. Just from going and covering a ball game on a Friday night, I went down to Goldthwaite this year and covered the Goldthwaite Crawford game, and they don't have a track around their field, and it's not that tall of a stadium, but it's packed.
Right.
And so you're looking out the window, and you're so close to the players. It's just a really cool environment. I've always thought that 1A, 2A, 3A was the most fun in terms of actual connection to the town and how excited everybody gets about it. I feel like as you go up, as somebody who interviews people all the time, as you go up in classification and you get into city kids and the higher classifications, you get kids that are just naturally more engaged and so it changes, but in terms of the book, I just made a list of 50 people that played at different towns and where I, how I might talk to them and who I might be able to get to interview. And that's how I went about it. And certainly I did want to have a balance. I even thought of the balance more of offensive players, defensive players, offensive linemen, kicker,
Sure.
I got the Mason Crosby chapter in there to represent the kicker. And that was where I went for a balance on that. And then I wanted to go, and even my friends give me a hard time that it's Texas Tech heavy,
Oh, here we go.
But I wanted to balance that. I wanted Texas Tech and Texas A&M and Texas and Baylor and TCU and all those schools to be represented in terms of personalities. So there was a lot of different ways to try to balance it. And north to south, east to west too.
Yeah, and I know you got more important things to do than talk to us, but I do want to.
As long as you want.
You talk with Cliff Kingsbury in the book,
right?
And that's the perfect example of a dude who is he's a superstar, right? He was a superstar at Tech. He is a god out there in Lubbock, and he's got the bachelor look and all that fun stuff. He's an icon,
right?
And yet you go and you say, hey, let's talk about being a New Braunfels unicorn.
Right.
And you might as well say, let's just go get some ice cream to a kid because that's what they want to talk about. And that's what I think is so cool and so unique about Texas high school football.
Well, yeah, and I think with Cliff Kingsbury, there is that out front and there's that persona that everybody sees first.
Sure.
But, you're talking about a high school coach's kid.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
And growing up. And an undervalued prospect coming out of high school, too. And so – I think he's in a really good place to be someone that goes out and tries to find those other undervalued guys and help them become household names in college football. And so, he has a great appreciation for high school football. But, he grew up with it. So another guy that's like that is another Texas Tech guy is Graham Harrell, who I think is going to be a head coach before too very long.
Not too long,
He's on his
and
way.
He is, and his dad was an innovator in high school coaching, and the Ennis chapter kind of brings that forward. But, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of those guys that are just, I mean, their lives are entrenched. Lovie Smith said, I wouldn't be where I was today if it weren't for high school football. And that was one of the most meaningful things anybody said to me throughout the whole process.
Well, and you firmly believe it. Let me grab this so I can hold it up for the camera.
Oh, I got it on here.
Oh,
I got it full screen on here.
Never mind.
Here it is
Take
again.
your book back.
Here it is in high resolution.
The Republic of Football, Legends of the Texas High School Game. Chad Conine is the author. You can find it at utexaspress.com. I now think I know what I am getting my dad for Christmas. So,
I think there's still time to go to a Barnes & Noble, too, and ask them to order it. So
okay.
Yes.
If you want to, if whatever's easiest for you, go to your local bookstore and demand that they put it on the shelves.
Thanks, guys.
It's Chad Conine. Chad, appreciate your time, my friend, and best of luck with the book. We know it's going to be a big hit.
Well, I appreciate it.
Absolutely.